Hello. Now this is the second part of the series about Rome. We're going to talk about the emperors Nerva and Trajan. Now Nero, the last of the Judean died AD 68. After his death, a 3-year civil war raged with thousands of dead. Jews were killed, Germans were killed, Gauls were killed, Romans were killed, emperors rose and fell. Galba, Otho, Vitellius. And then an obscure commander called Flavius Vespasian, the leader of the Judean War, became emperor. In 70 AD, he proved to be a mild and a good commander. He was succeeded by his son Titus, who ruled for only 2 years. He was a good and mild commander also. And then the youngest son, Domitian, took over. Now Domitian was not like his father and his son Titus. He proved to be a ruthless tyrant, a weak commander, and a weak military commander also. Now Domitian embarked on wars against the Dacians, and his commander Cornelius Fuscus was defeated, and Rome was humiliated. Rome was also defeated by the Marcomanni, a Germanic tribe. And then Domitian fought a second war against the Dacians, and he was victorious at a place called Tapae at the Iron Gorge in southern western Romania. Even though he was victorious, he did a dreadful mistake. Instead of pressing on with his advantage, seizing parts of southern Romania, he did exactly the opposite of what he was supposed to do. He started paying tribute to the Dacians, to the brilliant commander Decebalus. Now the Dacian tribes, who were related to the Thracians and the Mysians and the Trevalians, they combined themselves. They combined all the city-states, and they also aligned themselves to the Sarmatians. That's why they were so powerful. They also had gold, wood, water, and lots of resources. Dacia was a wealthy country, and on top of that wealth came Rome's fine, let's say, and he also gave them technology, and there were lots of deserters who joined with Decebalus. So Dacia was a power to be reckoned with. And a few years back there was Budapesta, another powerful Dacian leader, equally powerful as Decebalus. Now Domitian was on the way down when he started killing off senators, his cousin Clemens, members of his family. His wife Domitia and others plotted against him. And so the path lay open for new members of the Roman aristocracy to take over. Just like in the case of Nero. When Nero fell, all of a sudden commanders took over. Now, in 97 AD, Nerva was murdered by his chamberlain Stephanos, who was paid by Domitia and others. And Nerva took over command. He became emperor. Now Nerva was an old senator. He did not distinguish himself in battles. He was born in 32 AD. He was roughly 65 when he took over. He was weak in body, and he had no military support. You see, Domitian, he might have been hated by the people, by the Senate, but he was loved by his Praetorian guards and his elite troops. Now, Casperius Aelianus, the commander of the Praetorians, who was disaffected by the death of his master Domitian, forced Nerva to execute Stephanos, an ex-consul Veiendo, and others who were part of the plot to kill Domitian. Now Nerva agreed to execute these people, but then Casperius pressed Nerva to kill people that Nerva did not want to be killed. Nerva disagreed with Casperius Aelianus and his picked Praetorians. And then Casperius Aelianus and his picked Praetorians, they actually besieged the palace, and they blackmailed Nerva himself. And so Nerva had no other choice but to call the commander of Germania, Trajan, to Rome. And once Trajan arrived at Rome, Trajan was adopted as his co-emperor and co-consul. So in 98 AD, Trajan and Nerva were consuls. And that was a pretty obvious way to show to the people that Trajan was his co-ruler, to appoint him consul. Of course, when we're talking about the empire and not the Roman Republic, these are not real consuls. I mean, these are not real elections. The consuls were not immediately elected by the people. They were more or less personal friends of the emperor and of the Senate. So it was just a little game the emperor played with the senators and the knights. So that's why Trajan became so powerful. Now, 3 months after they co-ruled together, Nerva died of natural causes, aged nearly 66. And so Trajan, the commander of Germania, became emperor, and he proved to be one of the best, the most powerful emperors of all times. Trajan was not part of the elite. He was part of the elite, but he was not the elite. His father was a commander who served under Vespasian when they were fighting the Judean War. In 91 AD, 6 years before Domitian was murdered, Trajan was appointed consul for the first time. Trajan was born in 53 AD in Italica, a Roman colony in Spain of Italian stock. So the first thing that Trajan did when he became emperor in 98 AD was to call Casperius Aelianus and his picked Praetorian guards to the palace, and he offered them a deal. Now the deal was that there was no deal. Trajan just lured them there, and he treacherously arrested them and executed them. So what Trajan did was something similar to what Tiberius did to Aelianus when he realized that Aelianus was plotting against him. He just lured them, he tricked them, and he had them executed, because he feared that the Praetorians could harm him. Now we're talking about an entire legion of 5,500 to 6,000 picked men, and they could harm Trajan. Not all the Praetorians were killed. It was just Casperius Aelianus and some of his picked men. The rest of them just joined the ranks, along with other picked mercenaries and picked Romans and Italians. Now Trajan, soon as he became emperor, he wanted to get rid of the Dacians. Why? Firstly, because he wanted to eliminate the humiliation he suffered. The Romans suffered when they were defeated by Cumenius Fuscus. He annulled the treaty, the humiliating treaty that Domitian signed after the Battle of Tapae. He stopped paying tribute to the Dacians, and he demanded the deserters back, and he wanted to turn them into a province so that Rome could gain prestige once more. In 100 AD, he was appointed consul again. Trajan was appointed consul for the third time. In 101, the First Dacian War, commanded by Trajan, began again, and he was appointed consul for the fourth time. It was a sure way to explain to the Romans that he was the commander, and that's why he was appointed consul. So, in the First Dacian War, the Romans defeated the Dacians at the Second Battle of Tapae at the Iron Gorge. Now the Romans suffered heavy casualties as well. They were victorious, but they suffered heavy casualties themselves. It is said that Trajan, according to Cassius Dio, he was there at the first line and he was bandaging. He tore his clothes and used it to bandage the wounded Romans. And then the Romans placed several garrisons and they retired. Decebalus was forced to sign a treaty. But everyone knew, actually the Moors under a rising star, Lucius Quietus, also participated in the battle. Now, everyone knew that the Dacian War would not end there in 101. They knew that it would continue until Decebalus was really killed or gotten rid of, because Decebalus was a crafty person and he was a real commander, just like Buonavista was. In 103, Trajan is appointed consul once more. In 104, the Second Dacian War commences. It appears that the Dacians broke the treaty or the Romans broke the treaty. No one knows exactly what happened. Now, several Dacians, fearing Trajan, they joined the Roman side, but some of the deserters, they were not deserters actually, they plotted to murder Trajan. Thankfully, they were apprehended, arrested and executed. Trajan wasted most of 104 in building forts and bridges. He created the infrastructure to crush the Dacians in the following year. Now, 105, the final year of the Dacian War, came about. There was at least one battle that was fought. Now, several historians who have studied the column of Trajan and the Forum decided that there was at least a battle where the Dacian cavalry, supported by the Sarmatian cavalry, they attacked a Roman fort that was situated in a river. Roman reinforcements arrived and the Dacians were crushed with heavy casualties. The third battle took place at Sarmatian itself. Sarmatian was the capital of Decebalus. Now Trajan and his picked forces, they captured and sacked the city. It's not certain whether Decebalus was killed or he murdered himself, but what is sure that he was decapitated. And Hadrian distinguished himself, and Latin colonists entered Dacia. Trajan founded the colonies Nicopolis and Marcianopolis in what is today northern Bulgaria. So Dacia was subdued. Now one of Decebalus' commanders, he hid the gold in the river, and he actually showed the Romans where the gold was, and they uncovered the gold. Now, this gold paid for some of the edifices built by the Romans. Trajan was known to have constructed some of the finest edifices Rome had ever seen, and one of his finest architects was Apollodorus of Damascus, a Greek architect. And Dacian gold will actually pay for all that, and the welfare. Trajan created the alimenta, and Dacian gold paid for that too. Now, meanwhile, another campaign was taking place in 105. Palma, the governor of Syria, subdued the Nabataeans and he seized Petra. You see, years ago, Pompey fought against the Nabataeans and he beat them twice, but he never actually subdued them. They were more or less semi-independent Nabataeans based around Petra, these Arabians, the Harith or Arefas dynasty, and at times they actually seized Damascus. But in 105 they were finally subdued. Now, after a few years of peace, in 107, future Emperor Hadrian was appointed proconsul of Pannonia. Now the Sarmatians, who were allied to the Dacians, invaded Pannonia, but they were defeated by the Romans. And we don't know much about that campaign either. In 113, Trajan was appointed consul once more. Now in 115, Trajan embarked on a huge scale campaign against the Parthian Empire. It would last for 2.5 years. And the Parthians were not alone. The Parthians were the superpower. And they were allied to the Assyrians, to the Armenians, the Abiadinians, the Osroenians, the Greek colonists, the Jews, Jewish diaspora. So in 115, the Romans started by invading Armenia. They seized Samosata, Satala, Elegia, and the rest of Armenia. They turned it into a province and they suffered light losses. Later, they turned south. The Romans turned south and they invaded Assyria proper. They captured Nisibis and Batne. And then they seized Edessa, the capital of Osroene, and King Avgar, or Avgos, of Osroene became a client king. And instead of being a client king to the Parthians, he became a Roman Sassanite. Lucius Quietus, the Berber commander, with his troops captured by force Singara, and Trajan, with the main force, seized the province, the Assyrian province of Adiabene. And its client king, Megavartis, surrendered. Now the Romans returned for winter quarters to Antioch. Now the Romans always used to have Antioch as their base when they attacked the Assyrian or Armenian kingdoms. You see, Assyria and Armenia were buffer states. They were buffer states within the between the Parthian Persian Empire and the Roman Empire. So returning to Antioch would take a lot of time. Now what happened was that the Romans suffered a disaster. It was not Trajan's fault. An earthquake hit Antioch. The consul of the year was killed. A few minor soldiers were killed or wounded, and Trajan was nearly killed when the roof nearly fell off his head. 116, in the second year, the Romans returned to northern Assyria, and that took a lot of time if you consider the distance between Antioch and northern Assyria, Iraq. Now the Romans defeated the Gordyaenians. Now the Gordyaenians are the descendants of the modern Kurds, and they defeated them in a battle that took place near a river, and that is probably near modern Kirkuk. Now a group of Romans who were seized perhaps in the previous year by the Parthians, they were banded together at a fort called Adenistra, and this heroic figure, Sentius, he led a rebellion. Somehow they got loose, they broke free from the prisons or their bonds, they overpowered the Parthian garrison in the city, and they opened the gates to a Roman force. So that was another victory for Trajan and his commander Sentius. The Romans seized Babylon, the biggest, largest and most magnificent city in Assyria. Then they captured Ctesiphon, the capital of the Parthian Empire. The Parthians were humiliated by that. They seized Seleucia at the Tigris, the Greek colony, and the island state of Messene. King Athambelos, the client Parthian king, surrendered and he became a Roman client. And then the Romans, after they had subdued the Parthians, after they had humiliated the Parthians, after they had suffered few losses, they began the return journey. And then the Parthians rebelled in the Roman rear, and the Romans, they had to rush back and protect their garrisons and their victories. Now, during the late summer of 116, the Parthians defeated the force of Maximus. We don't know what happened, how that happened, how many there were, but that was one of Trajan's few defeats. Lucius Quietus and his Berber troops recaptured Nisibis. They defeated the rebel garrison, the Parthians. Then Lucius Quietus captured and sacked Edessa, the capital of Osroene, and we don't know what happened to Avgar. Perhaps Avgar was playing a double game and perhaps he was killed, we don't know. Then another Roman force under Erucius Clarus and Julius Alexander. Now Julius Alexander was probably a Syrian prince from Emesa. They captured and sacked the Greek colony Seleucia, so the Greeks were probably bribed by the Parthians to rebel in the Roman rear, and they suffered hell for it. Then Trajan captured the fort called Osogarden, a rebel city, and that city was later captured by Julian the Apostate, 2 centuries later. Trajan himself returned to Ctesiphon, and he seized the daughter of the Shah, Khosrau or Osroes, and he appointed a client, pro-Roman king called Arabian, Aramaic, Arabo-Syrian city called Hatra. Now Hatra was hostile both to Rome and both to Parthia. They were fiercely independent. The city has amazing ruins, even today. During the attacks, Trajan got near the walls and he was nearly killed by arrows, by enemy arrows. And the Romans had to retire from the city without even capturing it. Septimus Severus would also fail to capture the city years later. And by the end of 116, Trajan formed 3 provinces: Armenia, Syria and Mesopotamia, and the Parthian Empire. The rebels were defeated and the Parthians retreated to Parthia and Persia proper. Meanwhile, the Jews who lived in Cyrene, Cyprus and Alexandria, they were bribed by the Parthians to rebel in the Roman rear. The Jewish rebels in Gyrene were led by a certain Andreas, the Jews who lived in Cyprus were led by a certain Artemion, and the Jews in Alexandria were led by Lucullus. Now the Roman commander, the Roman proconsul of Egypt called Lupus, he tried to attack the Jewish rebels and he was defeated and humiliated. So we have a second and a third defeat by Trajan. However, Lucius Quietus, returning from the Assyrian front with his Berbers and the rest of his troops, defeated and massacred the Jewish rebels. We don't know exactly what happened. Many of the Greek citizens joined the Roman forces and they killed some civilians. And this war was known as the Githus War and it lasted for 2 years. In the summer of 117, it was in the summer of 117 that the Githus War ended. It started in late 116 and it ended in 117. It lasted for nearly 2 years. Now Trajan, on the return journey, he suffered from an ailment and he died in the Cilician city called Selinus. And he died aged nearly 64 after a nearly 20-year reign. So you see, Trajan was victorious on all fronts. However, his successor Hadrian, the hero of Dacia, the hero of Pannonia, when he was appointed emperor, he actually betrayed Trajan's dream and he returned Assyria and Mesopotamia to the Parthians. The Parthians got that back without firing a blow. So it was not Trajan's fault for losing the richest provinces available. 150 years later, Aurelian, even though Aurelian was one of the finest emperor soldiers Rome ever had, he betrayed most of Dacia. He abandoned most of what Trajan conquered then in 115, and he left it for the Germans to plunder. And again, that was not Trajan's fault. If Dacia and if Assyria was lost. So, in an assessment, we see that Trajan was the ultimate soldier emperor. He was victorious over the Dacians, over the Assyrians, over the Armenians, over the Osroenians, over the Gordyaenians, over the Jews, over the Nabataean Arabs of Petra, over the Greeks of Seleucia. He hardly lost a battle. He had ample gold from his Dacian campaign. He built wonderful edifices. The empire was going. He was actually Pliny, one of the well-known Roman scholars at the time, called him one of us. He's one of us. He's a simple folk. He's just a senator, just like us, just like Nerva. And he was not the tyrant that Domitian was. He was not the tyrant that Nero was. He was not the psychotic tyrant that Caligula was, Gaius. So in assessment we see that Trajan was one of the finest emperors Rome ever had since Augustus. his triumphs and his victories and his edifices and his architects and his philosophers prove that his nearly 20-year reign was a golden reign, and they were similar to the ages of Julius Caesar, Octavian, Augustus, Claudius, and the subsequent emperors, the emperors that followed Trajan, were also good emperors. We see Hadrian, we see Antoninus Pius, we see Marcus Aurelius, we see Lucius Verus being fine emperors and fine successors. And they probably owe their successes to Trajan himself. Now this is a modern portrait of Decebalus, the Dacian king, who fought against Domitian and Trajan together. You see a statue of Trajan in Munich. We see a second statue of Trajan in Munich as well. And this is Nerva, Trajan's predecessor, the elder of the senator, who appointed Trajan as his heir. And this bearded figure here is Hadrian, Trajan's successor in the empire. And this is Domitian, whose commander Cornelius Fuscus was defeated by Decebalus, and who, even though victorious, was forced to pay Decebalus an enmity